All right, so yeah, before we start, of course, we have the correct motivation. So think that surrounding yourself are all sentient beings, 6 realms, and a human aspect, although they're undergoing the individual sufferings, and focus upon their sufferings. Think that without understanding reality, I will not be able to help them, so that's why I'm here. And with that same intention, we think we should lead them in the prayers, and for that purpose also we have visualized in front Sakyamuni Buddha, surrounded by the masters of India and Tibet and other Buddhist traditions. And in front of that assembly, in front, we can recite the following prayers.
Oh, sorry, I've lost the prayers.
To the founder, the transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the full destroyer, the complete, perfect, full awakened being, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, Sagat and over the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed. Teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the complete and fully awakened one, the down transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, subdue the psychic one, I prostrate and offering scope for refuge. To the founder, the transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the full destroyer, the complete, perfect, full awakened being, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, the God and know of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you the complete, fully awakened one, the down transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, glorious and the prostrate and make open close forever. To the founder, down transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the full destroyer, the complete, perfect, full awakened being, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, Sagat and over the world, serene guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of God's human beings, to you the complete and fully awakened one, the down transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subdue from the Sakya clan, prostrate and go for refuge. When I was supreme amongst humans, you were born on this earth, you played out a 7th strand, and then said, I'm supreme in this world. To you, wise then I prostrate. A pure body is formed supremely pure, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain. Flame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best, Lord, to you prostrate. With supreme science, faced like a spotless moon, God-alike gold to you prostrate. Thus free like you, the 3 worlds are not, incomparable wise one to you prostrate. The Saviour having great compassion, the founding having all understanding. The field of merit, God is like a vast ocean. To you, the one gone to dustness, I prostrate. The purity that frees from attachment, the virtue that frees from the lower realms, the one path supplying pure reality, Dharma that pacifies, I prostrate. Those who are liberated and show the path to liberation, the holy field qualified for realization, who are devoted to the moral precepts, to you, sublime community standing virtue, I prostrate. Homage to the Supreme Buddha, homage to the Dharma refuge, homage to the Great Sangha. To all 3 ever devote homage. To all worldly respects, bounded bodies, as many as all realms and all aspects. In supreme faith I pay homage. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions. Perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind thoroughly. This is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a visible liberation, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a jewel or a drum. A dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, signal such. To these merits may sentient beings attain the rank of beautiful to be delivered deterred by the ways, aging, sickness. I prostrate to the Arya Tripuja. Thus did I hear at one time the Bhagavans was dwelling on the mass of Oasis mountain in Rajgir together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagavan was absorbed in the concentration on the characters of phenomena called found affection. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya, I believe his father, looked upon the very practice of the profound affection of wisdom, and beheld those 5 aggregates also as empty and ready. Then, to the power of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya, I believe his father. How should any son of the lineage who trained practice activities of profound affection? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya, his father, said this to the Venerable Shariputra. Shariputra, any son of the lineage, or daughter of the lineage, who wishes to practice activities of profound affection of wisdom, should look upon it like this, quickly and repeating, beholding those 5 exits, also as empty in nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form, and form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, composition, affective, emotions are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristics. Unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no consistent factors, no consciousness. No eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visible sound, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, no phenomenon. There is no I element, an absolute mind element, and a mental consciousness. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on, and up to include no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similar, there is no suffering, origination, sensation, and power. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, not an non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely and dwell on the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, to reach the end point of the divine. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times also manifest complete awakening and perfect, complete, in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the non-surprising mantra, mantra equal to the mantra truly pacified all suffering should be known as the truth, since it is not false. The mantra of perfection of wisdom is declared, Tayata, Gadagata, Varigata, Varasamgata, Shariputra, Bodhisattva, Mahat, the training of profound perfection of wisdom. Then the Bhagavan wrote concentration and commanded Arya. Well said, son of the lineage. It is like that. It is like that. One should practice profound perfection of wisdom. This is the Bhagavan, having thus spoken, the Venerable Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, and those down in giant finally, along with the worlds of gods, humans, asuras, overjoyed. I prostrate to the gathering of Dakinis of the three chakras, who abide of the holy using space, by the powers of your clairvoyance and magnetism, like the mother gods. Akasamara does not Akasamara Samarayape, Tayata, Gata, Paragata, Parasamgata, Bodhisattva. By the teachings of the three sublime jewels possessing the power of truth, may in and out the hindrance be transformed, may they be dispelled, and may they be pacified, into Bodhisattva. May all negative forces opposed to the Dharma be completely pacified, and may the host of 80,000 obstacles be pacified, and may we be separated from problems and harmful conditions to the Dharma, and may your enjoyments be corners to the Dharma, and may there be auspiciousness here right now. 93. The foundation of all good qualities. The foundation of all good qualities is the kind and perfect pure Guru. Correctly devoting to him is the root of the path. By clearly seeing this and applying great effort, please bless me to rely upon him with great respect. Understanding that the precious freedom of this rebirth is found only once, is greatly meaningful and difficult to find again. Please bless me to generate in mind that unceasingly day and night takes its essence. This life is impermanent as a water bubble. Remember how quickly it decays and death comes. After that, just like the shadow follows the body, the reasons of black and white come and follow. Finding firm and definite conviction in this, please bless me always to be careful, to abandon even the slightest negativities and accomplish all virtuous deeds. Seeking samsaric pleasures is a door to all suffering. They are uncertain, cannot be relied upon. Recognize these shortcomings, please bless me to generate a strong wish for the bliss of liberation. Led by this pure thought, mindfulness, alertness, and great caution arise. The root of the teachings is keeping the Pratyamokshya vows. Please bless me to accomplish this essential practice. Just as I've fallen into the sea of samsara, so have all modern migratory beings. Please bless me to see this and train in supreme bodhicitta, and be the responsibility of freeing migratory beings. Even if I develop only bodhicitta, but I do not practice the three types of morality, I will not achieve enlightenment. With my clear recognition of this, Please bless me to practice the Bodhisattva vows with great energy. Once I've pacified distraction to wrong objects and correctly analyzed the meaning of reality, please bless me to generate quickly within my mind stream the unified part of calm abiding and special insight. Having become a pure vessel by training in the general part, please bless me to enter the holy gateway of the fortunate ones, the supreme Vajra vehicle. At that time, the basis of accomplishing the two attainments is keeping pure vows and samaya. As I become firmly convinced of this, please bless me to protect these vows and pledges like my life. Then, having realized the importance of the two stages, the essence of the Vajrayana, by practicing with great energy, never giving up the 4 sessions, please bless me to realize the teaching of the Holy Guru. Like that, may the Gurus who show the noble paths and the spiritual principles accept long life. Please bless me to pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Can all my lives never be separated from perfect Gurus, may I enjoy the magnificent Dharma by completing the qualities of stages and paths. May I quickly attain the state of Vajradhara. Janjo Bada Dani Yaza Ji Dagi Jeje Gibe Sona Dola Penje Sangye Doba Jo Sangye Chedam Sangye Sona Janjo Bada Dani Yaza Ji Dagi Jinso Gibe Sona Dola Penje Sangye Doba Jo Sangye Chedam Sangye Sona Janjo Bada Dani Yaza Ji Dagi Jeje Gibe Sona Dola Penje Sangye Doba Jo. Yeah, so welcome everybody. Good evening. So to start with a quotation from one of the great Indian Mahasiddhas, Sarahara. So Saraha is a great, accomplished, realized being of the Vajrayana, so to say. So there's a lot of songs, inspiring songs. But also he quoted, or he said basically that if you enter into emptiness, but devoid of compassion, one will not find the supreme part. At the same time, meditating on compassion alone will not achieve the state of even liberation, and one will remain in samsara. So whoever is capable of uniting the two, one will not fall into two extremes of samsara or nirvana. So that's a quotation summarizing the whole Buddhist path and the need, especially for the Bodhisattvayana, to generate compassion as the motivation, and then combine it with emptiness in order to eliminate all obscurations to omniscience. Because without emptiness, you cannot even achieve the state of nirvana, as he says, right? Without emptiness, you are still stuck in samsara. So that means that you have to realize eventually emptiness, because on the part of seeing, when you say taita, gata gata, paragata, parasamgata bodhisattva, gata gata, paragata, on the paragata, you have a direct perception of emptiness. Yeah? So that means only then an Arya being will not create causes for samsara anymore, newly. Right? So that's a very clear teaching that we need eventually to realize emptiness, one aspect. Another aspect is if you, with a quote from Nagarjuna as we start in the beginning of the teaching, and the first basically, yeah, the first verse of the text we covered last week, where it says, you know, out of having suffering of great compassion, right? You taught the teachings on emptiness. So that means that if you have strong compassion, then you will work very hard to get the understanding of emptiness. Because without emptiness, you will not be able to liberate sentient beings. So the stronger your compassion becomes, the stronger your striving for understanding emptiness should become as well. So that's in that first verse of the text, very clear. So Sarah says then, you know, with emptiness itself, if emptiness is not the understanding of emptiness, if it's not motivated with compassion, or if it's not motivated with striving for liberation, with renunciation, it will not accomplish either of those two goals, right? So that means you have to motivate emptiness with renunciation in order to achieve liberation, and with compassion in order to achieve the state of a Buddha. Then he also says that if you don't, so if you combine the two, that's what he says, if you're able to unite compassion and emptiness, then you will not fall into two extremes. The extreme of nirvana and the extreme of samsara. Yeah, so samsara means if you understand emptiness, you will, based on compassion, you will get out of samsara because you will achieve the state of a Buddha, which is liberated from samsara, right? And at the same time, you will not fall into the extreme of shikita, shivata, the extreme of the bliss for oneself. You know? So if you know all sentient beings want happiness and don't like suffering, so if we only strive ourselves to get rid of suffering and achieve the state of nirvana, it's very good striving, but still, it's for one person, right? So if you think about all countless sentient beings, then based on compassion, you realize emptiness, and then there's the great benefits of that it becomes a cause for enlightenment. Yeah, so the compassion is here been labeled, but yeah, indirectly it indicates bodhicitta, right? So because compassion is the root cause, or the substantial cause, so to say, for bodhicitta to arise. Yeah? The wish for all sentient beings to be free of suffering, that is great compassion. And in order to achieve the state of enlightenment for that purpose, yeah, if you combine it with that together, then it becomes bodhicitta, the great mind of enlightenment. Yeah, so we should motivate ourselves accordingly today. So think about suffering sentient beings and think that suffering sentient beings are suffering because of afflictions, and afflictions are rooted in ignorance. Yeah, so that's quite evident. Whatever, I just read an interesting article. Tenzin Sepakla, the translator of His Holiness, he sent me a link. One of the scientists, together with His Holiness, maybe you've seen, I'm not sure, but I forgot the name of the scientist. But there was a person who was depressed, the third person, and then His Holiness says, "Why?" And then this person says, "You know, because I am depressed, you know." And then His Holiness said, "Where is this I?" And then she starts searching. She's pointing at the chest. And then together with the scientists, they were asking, is it square, or it's like a circle, or how is it? And he says, it's just like a circle. Okay, then you do one meditation. You try to move it 1 centimeter to the other side. And then she looked, and then she came back, and then she laughed. She said, it disappeared, he said. Very interesting. Yeah. So that means that kind of, the I where we talked about, you know, it looks very concrete, right? But the closer we look, we cannot find it. Yeah? Like a mirage on the road, you know. From a distance, it looks very solid, but the closer you get, examining, you see it doesn't exist the way it appears, right? So the I, same thing. Yeah. So in the verse number 2, we talked about last week, that there appears to be a very concrete I, but if you look among the aggregates of body and mind, then it actually doesn't really, we cannot really find it. And so that's what we discussed a little bit yesterday, not yesterday, last week. And then we also said in meditation on emptiness, we're going to do a short meditation today, I was thinking. So with the meditation on emptiness, the real meditation on emptiness means only emptiness appears to the mind. It's like the sky, they say, right? Because you recognize what that object of reflection, yeah, how does the I appear? Yes, we discussed last time, when afflictions come up very strongly, or when a person criticizes you, when you're close to death, there's a very strong concept of I that arises. So that should be recognized. Yeah? And if it's recognized, then from the corner of the mind you hold it, and from the other part of the mind you try to examine it. Where is it? Without losing that picture. And we talked about persons watching 1 or 2 mobile phones and just walking on the street and can really follow. There's even more exciting phenomena I saw a few days ago. We have a couple living on the other side of the building, and they're very good in conversations. And they speak a language, they use their hands, the European language. And this lady I saw outside, she was on a skateboarding, and at the same time, she was capable of having a conversation with her hands. Well, skateboard is quite amazing. So we can do things at the same time, right? So instead of skateboarding and having those kind of conversations, we might as well just sit and meditate and recognize from one corner of the mind, hold how the object appears, how the I appears. And then from the other corner of the mind, try to analyze. Does it exist the way it appears, right? Because the way it appears causes the problem, right? The way it appears causes the problem. So the question is, does it exist the way it appears? Yeah, because we also saw not everything that exists, how things appear. Yeah, with a training example, with mental images, that appears to our mind, we can see that the mental image of the person we get angry at, or the object we get attached at, is not the actual person. It's just a mental fabrication that either overestimates the faults or overestimates the qualities. Yeah, so also scientists, they come to the same conclusion, not all of them, but quite a few, that in psychology, that the majority is just overestimation of certain aspects of the object, which doesn't abide with the actual object, but abides with the mental image of the actual object. Yeah, so many things that appear to our minds is not reality. Yeah, so we talked about, I think, movie stars on the screen, they look quite amazing, but when you meet them in person, then they don't look that amazing. Or they photoshopped. I heard some time ago that some people, they get photoshopped. So it means all the ugly parts they've been creamed with the software. So yeah. So if you have a picture and you enlarge the picture, sometimes on the mobile phone you can enlarge, and then you see actually the real skin. So that means that sometimes how things appear is not always reality by closer examination. Yeah. So that means that how things appear we take for granted. That's giving us a problem. Yeah. So that we talked about last time. So it's very important to get a clear picture of how things appear to the mind, and then examine, if they can be found. Why examine if they can be found? Because if they exist the way they appear, they should be able to be found somewhere, right? So that's the question we have to go towards too. So in the mind-only school, in relation with verse number 5, you don't have to read now, but we'll do later. So also that talks about kind of external objects. They appear, without connection with the mind, right? So for us, it's very similar. When we look at the computer, look at the table, the clock, mobile phone, it looks all by itself. Everything exists all by itself, without dependence. That's how it appears. But actually, in order to appear to the mind, there should be a mind be able to apprehend it, right? And the way we look at an object, and you look at object, for example, you're looking through this camera, I do like this, my finger becomes very big, you see? You see that? But my finger is not that big. You see? So that means you looking here and the people sitting here looking at me from different angles, you see different Transcendent Namdaks, right? You see Transcendent with a very big finger, and people here, they don't see that big finger. But it appears like that. So that means we have kind of individual appearances, you know? And the individual appearances we take for granted to be the reality. But actually, it's different from others. You know, we have the example of to relate with this, mind-only school is very interesting in that regard. You know? They say the object that appears, the uncommon appearance to a particular person, and the mind apprehending that particular appearance are empty of a different substance, meaning that some interpretations, they say they're in one nature. So they're completely different from any other continuity of consciousness. So how things appear to you and how things appear to the person sitting next to you or person in the other room, you know, is completely different. But we believe what appears to us to be the reality, right? Yeah, so that's not always the case, but we think that's the case. So that's a problem. Yeah? So that means that how things appear to your consciousness and how things appear to somebody else's consciousness are two different things, and the two people say, I'm right, right? So a simple example we know from the meditations on equanimity, right? The person who is dear to us, we see as friend. The person who is as a distant, we see as dislike. But somebody else can see those two persons completely different. But we believe that's reality, and the other person also believes it's reality. So what is reality? That's the question, you know. So to come back, that things appear out there, not only as friend, enemy, stranger, but also from their own side, existing friend, enemy, stranger. If you don't examine, it appears like that. If we start examining them, then we come to the conclusion that they're not that kind of concrete, different as they appear. Yeah, so that's a kind of logic or training of reasoning we have to apply in order to see reality as it is. Yeah, so that means whatever appears to our mind is not always reality. Yeah, so in a similar way, so those things are to a certain extent we can relate to, easier, I think. So that's why the mind-only school, from that point of view, with these examples, is easier to be understood, right? So, but that is even more subtle level of appearance and not being reality. And that's what we're talking about here, is that how does the I and mind appear to the mind? And somebody criticizes you or you know, strong attachment or anger that comes up, you know, it's a very concrete concept of I, me, myself. How dare this person say this, or I need this, I need that. You know, so that I, if you really examine well, how does it appear? It appears to be very concrete, almost existing from its own side. And if you examine well, it appears to be mixed with the aggregates. So that's why in this example, the person was pointing at the chest. You know, sometimes people do like that. But actually it seems to, if you really examine well, it appears to be kind of mixed with aggregates. So that's what we have to go towards too, those who studied more, because that innate apprehension of a self. Yeah, so there's innate one, and that is acquired by form of tenet. So innate means since beginning of lifetime. So that's the root cause of samsara that has to be eliminated, not the one where this temporarily came up by tenets. Yeah, so that means that this innate apprehension of a self, you know, by focusing upon body and mind, there appears to be I and mine existing inherently by themselves. So that's what we call the view of the transitory collection. Transitory collection meaning the aggregates, the collection of body and mind, right? And the collection of body and mind is momentary changing. That's why it's called the transitory collection. And the view of that in an incorrect way is to focus upon the body and mind, and then seeing there is a self, or apprehending there is a self, or I am mine, to be more precise, that exists inherently without dependence. So that's the real kakcha, or the object of refutation. So in order to understand that, you need to do quite some study. So that's why we're here. And next to the study, a lot of accumulation of merit and purification, as we discussed last time. It's not something that comes overnight. So that's why, it's even Lama Tsongkhapa, many masters of the past, it takes a long time. So but we have to use reasoning, and with reasoning itself already, the concrete aspects of I, mine. So I means the self. Mine means is a possessive particle, right? Means the objects related in relation with the self. My computer, my time, It's my time is so precious. So sometimes when I'm fed up with things and then have to do something on the computer but it doesn't really work, then I said, oh, my time. So that means that, that I comes up. That's a very important I, and that I appears very concrete. My time. So in that regards, a possessive aspect, which has a relation with self. The self appears very concrete, and then everything in relation with that self also appears concrete in the concept of mine. So I am mine, to see them inherently as existing from their own side. So that's the technical aspect. So then how it appears, it appears to exist, it likes to exist. It appears to be in a way that we believe it exists, in the way it appears. So the way it appears, that causes the problem, because the way it appears, we start grasping at all the things. The way the I appears, right? If the I appears very concrete, then all the possessive relationships with mine also appears concrete. You see that? So that's the reason for those who study more, that in order to achieve liberation, you have to realize the selfness of phenomena as well, because you have to eliminate the obstacle or the object of refutation of what is in relation with mind. So that means that there's a concrete I that appears exists from its own side, and then there's these possessive things, my this, my that. So my this, my that. Also, all those things that are in the possession of, or my body or my mind, right? They also appear very concrete. And then on top of that, all the problems start to appear very concrete. So the whole world starts to appear independent. So that's why we see things. We have this concrete concept of I, right? And also the things around us, even according to Mind Only School, we can see things appear very solid out there. If you examine on the quantum level, same thing. You can see that things are not that concrete out there. Flowers look so amazing, but actually, if you look, they're momentarily changing, right? So, but they look all, very concrete out there without dependence. So, this rule of dependence proves that nothing can exist all by itself. So that's in a few coming up verses. You don't have to read now. I just explain. Verse number 6, for example, it starts to say that, there's a person who is feeling something, and there's an object, right? So same thing. If it's pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, that depends on an object, right? There's a contact, there's a mind apprehending that object, and there's a feeling with it, either pleasant or unpleasant or neutral. So you can see already there's an incredible kind of relationship. So if there's an object existing out there without dependence, and a mind existing without dependence, and a self existing without dependence, how can you be able to feel something? If everything exists by its own side, there's no possibility of interconnectedness or interrelationships, right? So that's why it's all connected. So there's a few verses we're going to cover today which talks about this proving that nothing exists from its own side by the power of reasoning, that everything is in the nature of interdependence or dependent origination. So that also helps us to prove that we conventionally exist, because conventionally there's a body and mind. I'm talking to you, you're listening, some people writing things down, some people thinking about it. So there's a mind, there's a body. Body is sitting there, you know, and the mind is thinking, right? I hope. So that means that there's a kind of busyness some way. Yeah, the body is also momentarily changing. So there's within the body and mind, there's actually nothing that exists from its own side. The body doesn't exist from its own side. The mind doesn't exist from its own side. And something else in body and mind doesn't exist from its own side. It just appears as a self, you know. So that's kind of a reasoning we can use. Yeah. But to go more about, yeah, to go back to verse number 2 of last week, then, you know, it talks about that it's neither the aggregates nor different from the aggregates, right? So where are you? If you call your own name, like Tenzin Namdak, where's Tenzin Namdak? It's not one with the aggregates. It's not different from the aggregates, you know. So you cannot find Tenzin Namdak among the aggregates, because if Tenzin Namdak, the concrete, from its own side existing Tenzin Namdak exists, you should be able to find it, right? And if it exists within body and mind, then we have a reasoning. We talked about one and different. Remember last time we did, no? Yeah. So that's also where we can try to meditate upon. So just to review that reasoning is kind of, if something exists, you know, we should be able to find it somewhere, right? That's the main point. But if something exists also, it should be one or different from this flower, right? You see? So everything that exists is one or different from this, right? So this flower, you know, this flower in front, is one with the flower itself, right? But this vase is different from this flower. You agree? So this vase exists. And if the vase exists, it should be either one or different from the flower, right? Only the flower itself is one with the flower, but everything else is, you know, everything else in the flower is different from flower, right? You follow that reasoning? Yeah. So in the same way, the flower is different from our body and mind, right? Or not? Yeah, that's logic. You know, so the flower is different from body and mind. The body is one with body, the mind is one with mind, right? So whatever exists should be either one with or different from body and mind, right? That's logic we apply. So if the I, how it appears, exists, it should be one with or different from body and mind, right? That's the first logic. So as soon as you have found that logic to be valid, then you go to the next one. And before we start with that, we first have to see how does it appear. So when somebody gets angry at you or criticizes you, or you're close to death or fear, there's a very strong I that comes up. I, you know, so that has to be recognized. Then you most of the time should be, you should spend on how that appears. Yeah. Then you analyze, okay, if it exists exactly that way, how it appears, right? Then I should be able to find it, meaning it should be one or different from body and mind, right? So you just conclude it. So then you check. If it's one with the body, that means that the body has many parts. You see? You have legs, arms, hands, you know, head and chest and inside, all kind of stuff. So, so there's many parts to the body. So if it's one with the body, also it should have all those different parts, right? Or not? But it doesn't have those different parts because it appears to be one, kind of solid from its own side. Yeah, so in that regard, we say, oh, it cannot be one with the body. You see? So that's a very important conclusion. So then we analyze, okay, if it's not one with the body, then maybe it's different, right? But then you imagine, without losing the object of refutation, you put the body aside, you know, separate. Does the I still appear or not? So then you cannot find it in the sense of, if we say my arm, my leg, so it's not inherently separate from the body, right? Yeah, there's logic, but you have to get some experience to get the real understanding of this, right? In the text it's logical, but without meditating on it, then it's just words. Like His Holiness says often to the monks, you know, clapping your hands is not enough, because we clap a lot of our hands in debate. Not one hand clapping, but two hands. So some Zen koan says one hand clapping, but we clap with two hands. There's a lot of noise. But yeah, that by itself is a very incredible system of analyzing. The mind gets really sharp and learns how to, you know, especially for this kind of reasoning, learns how to, okay, with this or that, no other possibility, next step. So that's a very important progress we have to try to analyze. Yeah, so yeah, it's not one and it's not different from the body. Then mind, if it exists the way it appears, we said it's not one and different from the body, so maybe then it's the mind. Yes, some Buddhist schools, they think the self is the same as a continuity of consciousness of the mind, right? Or technically speaking, the mental consciousness, which is the illustration of a person. You know, sometimes, where's the I? Oh, that's the continuity of consciousness. You know, but if you check in your continuity of consciousness, if it's one with that or different, right? Same reasoning. Yeah, so this one and different reasoning is the main meditation within most of the lamrims, especially the more experiential, shorter lamrims like Babonga Rinpoche and some other ones, right? Path of Bliss and Kasa, the quick, swift part, you know. Yeah, and many meditators of the past, they've praised this reasoning so much. And yeah, because it's very strong reasoning that you have how it appears, and then you just use reasoning and see it doesn't exist the way it appears, and you can get it, you know. So yeah, so just to go back, so you have to have a clear picture. How does it appear? We realize it's not one or different from the body, so then maybe it's one or different from the mind, right? So then you check. The mind is a flux of many moments, and we have different types of consciousness, more coarser forms of consciousness, more subtler forms of consciousness, dream consciousness, waking state, sense consciousness, mental consciousness. So there's also many aspects, but it appears to be one. If you really analyze, the I appears to be one. So if it's one with consciousness, it also should be many, because we have, you know, 5 sense consciousnesses, 1 mental consciousness. If you think it's mental consciousness, then even within the continuity of mental consciousness, many moments. So where is it? So can it be one? Because it should have many moments, and it doesn't. It appears to be. So that's why we try to refute here that it appears in a way, and if it exists exactly according to what it appears, that's the question. That's why we use this reasoning. So it's not one with consciousness, and then you try to see if it's different from consciousness, right? So different, if you say, then how can you say my feeling, my this, my that? You know? So if you try to separate your consciousness from how the I appears, then also you can see that the I doesn't appear anymore. Yeah, so that also can be one or different from consciousness, you see? So after that step, you first let how does it appear? Then you say it's not one and different. Oh, sorry, then you say when it exists the way it appears, it should be one and different, right? Yeah, so then you analyze it's not one and different from the body. Then you analyze it's not one and different from the mind. At that time, the meditator should see it doesn't exist. And then only the absence of it should appear to the mind. You know, so that's emptiness. You see, it's not all that difficult. That's kind of sky-like, or yeah, because the sky is also a vacuum of something, right? So it's kind of a lack, an absence. So that should appear to the mind. Yeah. So if that absence appears, it becomes an incredible powerful antidote to ignorance, because ignorance is this concrete concept of that the I appears inherently or by itself, while the mind understanding emptiness sees that that object of refutation, or that I appears, does not exist. You see? So it becomes an incredible kind of antidote. So only when that lack appears to the mind, it becomes the antidote. When you think, oh yeah, this is emptiness and interdependence, and that's still reasoning. It's not really the real meditation on emptiness yet. You see that? Yeah. So that's why when this one and different reasoning, it can happen that is a bit of fear, a shock to the system. Because since beginner's lifetime, we think the I exists the way it appears, you see? So now we tackle that one. So we refute it. So then we see that it doesn't exist the way it appears. Like Zonen said on the last teachings, he or she or whatever you call it, ignorance, will say Gonda, means sorry. And then, it disappears. So wisdom will remain. So yeah, I mention often this text by Benjamin Losenshu Gyatsen about debating ignorance, the wisdom debating ignorance. Incredible, profound text. His Holiness Dalai Lama says that based on that text, he got a distinction clear between Svatantrika and Prasangika view. It's a very moving text. How, in a very skillful way, there's a kind of a play, a debate between ignorance and wisdom realizing emptiness. So the ignorance is very strong and said, oh, I'm stronger than you because I'm here already since beginner's lifetime. And then wisdom says, yeah, but you don't even exist and I understand reality. So, so then you can see that this wisdom is more powerful. Yeah, it's like a Vajra. Like there's one text called the Vajra Cutter or Diamond Cutter Sutra. Yeah, so that's the meaning, right? Vajra or diamond in this regard. They use diamonds for cutting granite in the early days, granite and hard stones, little things of diamond, and they put on the saw, and then it cuts. So it's stronger than a strongest stone, So that means this realization of emptiness is the strongest of all because it cuts all afflictions, all misunderstandings. See? So that's why it's called Vajra Cutter, diamond cutter. So yeah, we're gonna do that one day. Over that sutra, very interesting. So that means emptiness will be the victor. It will be the victorious kind of state of mind because that's in accordance with reality. Yeah. So if the more you habituate your mind to things of reality, then things not in accordance with reality will disappear. So all the afflictions, anger, attachment, jealousy, pride, as we saw many times, they're not in accordance with reality, right? And because of that, that's one of the reasons we can eliminate them. Yeah, so that's because of that it's possible to achieve nirvana or enlightenment. Yeah. So I thought maybe today we do a short meditation. Is that okay? People don't fall asleep after a long day. Yeah. So try to sit wherever you sit, and then try to analyze by reflecting upon how. Take an example out of daily life, or when the I became very strong, when you almost died in an accident, or when somebody criticized you, or something went wrong, and your precious time, that happens to me sometimes, then an I comes up. So that you check, so check in those occasions, or anger, aversion, irritation, how it appears. How the I appears. That's the main thing. The other thing is just reasoning. That's the main clue, is to get a clear picture of how the I appears. Yeah, so that's what we have to work on the most initially. Yeah, so take that as an example, and then we do this reasoning, one and different. Yeah. So try. Normally you can do with Buddha. When you normally do in your room, then you have some time. Then it's good to do the visualization with the Buddha Sakyamuni as we normally do. Anyway, we can do, That's good, because that prevents obstacles. Because you purify and pacify obstacles with this visualization of the white light, and with the visualization of the yellow golden light, we establish the right conditions for the realization to come about. So it's very profound actually, and it's needed for this kind of realization. Eventually, you have to receive a lot of blessing, otherwise people with a lot of faith and a lot of blessing, then these things can be very, very powerful. You know? So then, especially with regard to realizing emptiness, understanding it in debate or discussion, okay, but to actually get it in meditation, it needs a few more causes and conditions. Yeah, so this is just one of them. Yeah, so let's do that. So Sakyamuni Buddha is still in front as we visualize doing the prayers, right? And then think, focus upon suffering sentient beings. Think without, without realizing emptiness and not be able to liberate them. And for that purpose, you ask and request the Buddha in front. And then the Buddha is very pleased. From his heart comes white light to the crown of your head, fills your whole body, and pacifies all obstacles and purifies all negative karma. And in particular, the obstacle for understanding emptiness. So think from the heart of Sakyamuni Buddha, white light comes, crown of your head, and this purification and pacification of obstacles happens. So do that for about a minute. The visualization with this kind of intention, right? Yeah. So then think that your whole body is filled with this white nectar light and completely purified. It pacifies all obstacles. And then with the same intention, you request Sakyamuni Buddha in front, and this time yellow golden nectar light comes to the crown of your head, fills your whole body. And by this, all the right conditions, so to say, come to establish the realizations, and in particular, emptiness. So do the visualization of the yellow golden nectar light from the heart of Sakyamuni Buddha to the crown of your head, fill your whole body. So also that we do that for about a minute. So then your mind is completely ready to meditate. So then try to recall an event out of your life that the I came up very, solid. How did it appear? Somebody maybe criticized you, or there was some aversion or anger or attachment, or just see an event in your daily life where the I came quite, clear. And don't get involved in that situation, just observe how it appeared. And so do that for about a minute or two. And then without losing that image or that appearance, you try to analyze, So from the corner of the mind, you hold how the I appears. Then you say, okay, if it exists the way it appears, it should be one or different from body and mind. There's no other possibility. And then you see, okay, if it's one or different from the body. The body has many parts, it appears to be one. Cannot. Or maybe then it's different from the body. So you put your body aside, and does it still appear? It seems to be mixed, right? So it's not inherently different, neither inherently one. Yes, I try to see that. And then try to think, oh, maybe it's not one or different from the body, and maybe it's one or different from the mind. Check. You know, the mind has many moments, subtle and coarser forms of consciousness, many main minds and mental factors. It cannot be one, otherwise it should appear as many, but it doesn't appear as many. It appears to be one. So it cannot be one with consciousness. So then maybe it's different, inherently different. So does it appear separate from consciousness? Also, it appears to be my consciousness, my feeling, mine experience. So it's actually also cannot be inherently different. So then you go back and make sure that object, how it appears, how does the self appear, the I. You know? So then you take that into account again and say, okay, if it exists the way it appears, it would be one or different body and mind. And we just saw it's not one and different from body, it's not one and different from mind. It doesn't exist. So then you come to the conclusion, the lack of how it appears. Just right there, it becomes empty. Yeah, so Lama Zopa Rinpoche says often, right there, it's empty. It's a very interesting comment, because that's exactly what it is. You know, it's like, it appears, you know, in a particular way, but actually you realize it doesn't exist in that way. So it's empty there, you know, a very interesting comment. Yeah. So anyway, that's just a short meditation you can do, but you can also, throughout your day, you can check. How does it appear? Because it's very important to get a clear picture how it appears. How does it appear? Does it exist the way it appears? Or the things around us appear so concrete? You know, how do it appear? Let's analyze and then check. Does it exist in that particular way or not? You see? So then, yeah, that's a kind of meditation on the one and different reasoning. So if you divide time, a little bit more time to that meditation, then it's important to get the object of reflection clear. Because mostly when we start analyzing, it starts to fade away. You know, like this lady in this this research, when they ask, oh, it does look like a circle. Okay, interesting. And then move the circle for about a centimeter. You know, she tried, but she said, oh, it's gone. So it means, you know, but as soon as we start analyzing, it fades away. So that's, in one way, it's good, but it's not really the cutting edge we have to go towards too, right? We have to have this absence. Yeah, so that's yeah, that's your homework for from now until next Wednesday. And next Wednesday we do another meditation. Yeah, so yeah, so the clue is just to see if it exists the way it appears. You know, that's the way it causes problems. You know, the way it appears causes a problem, because the I appears in a particular way, and we believe it exists in that way, and that's why we get angry. And that's why, you know, there's all these many examples. As soon with I, how dare this person say this to me, is pretty clear, right? When somebody criticizes us, how dare this person say this to me? Then the I appears very concrete. I don't have a mistake like that. It's not true. You know, so that's I appears very concrete, the I. Yeah. Then when it comes to possessions, the new car is scratched, or new phone that is, you know, somebody uses it and breaks it down. Yeah. I had in the early days, I had a very simple phone, but then I had this kind of, not a smartphone, but in the early days you had those phones you flap, open, like two things, and then the screen is there, and then point here. So I took care of a 6-year-old, and he realized how to make a photograph just by flapping it, opening it straight away. So he did it many times, and it broke. Yeah, he didn't know that was real. Yeah. So sometimes, yeah, when you have an object like that, and then it's mine, and then irritation happens, right? Because there's this I that's concrete, and then the possessive aspects of mine also becomes concrete, right? And then everything becomes concrete. So it all is rooted in this self. So that's why we say first we have to realize the selfness of a person, and then the selfness of phenomena. Yeah. So it's also easier because the object of refutation is easier to be recognized for the self of a person. So it looks very difficult and complex, but yeah, it's just a matter of time and experience, right? Yeah. So that's for all of you, the homework. So whenever you get up in the morning after you wash your face, check how does the I appear, and how does things around us appear, and analyze. This is very interesting meditation. Yeah. And then see that things are not that concrete, as we're gonna go over a few verses now, that everything is in nature of interdependence. And by seeing that everything is in nature of interdependence, we prove that, things don't exist as concrete as they appear, and that will break down this incorrect understanding of reality. And breaking down that, same in the mind only, things appear very concrete out there. So by these contemplations, you come to the conclusion that things don't exist that concrete out there. And then this mind aspects of possessive aspects, is less. A computer will break down one day, but it appears not to break down. So that understanding of interdependence, even in the form of cause and effect relationships, helps a lot. In this kind of reality. Yeah. So then that's the kind of the first part. Then the second part, we go over the text. Yeah, just because it's good. One way it's nice to do things like this, just talk. But also these texts, they carry a lot of blessing, especially because of coming from Nagarjuna, the master. Thanks to Nagarjuna, we get some understanding of emptiness. Otherwise, it's very difficult, I think. Especially in this particular tradition. Yeah. So we covered first. Which verses did we cover last time? You put your hands up. 1, 2, 3, or 4. Or 5. Okay. One did the homework. Yeah. Another one did homework. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I check. So I take notes now. Who did and who did not? It's important to because when we start with the basic program, then I'm going to make one rule very strict, so that people couldn't study before coming to class. You have to read the material before. So also in this kind of if you read the material before class, then it's kind of the outline, right? You know where we're going to talk about. If you just show up and think, oh, let's see, then of course it's really let's see, because you have maybe difficulty in focusing upon the main outline, because you didn't have that in your mind. If you have the main outline in your mind, or you know more or less where the verses are talking about, you can focus on the details. So you pick up much more. In the monastic institution, I said, when we went to Kensei, he never had a book on the table. And he would never teach things we haven't debated yet. That's a very uncommon system. If you ask something because we want to score in the debates, we want to win the debate, so we ask him for an insight. Then he would say, I don't know, you debate, and then we talk. So that's I've found that system very beneficial. If you haven't memorized things in the monastery before classes, then the teacher will ask you, then it's very embarrassing, because there's a lot of classmates. If you can't quote the particular quotation or definition, then it's very embarrassing. Yeah. You can play around with it in big gatherings, but there's one of the monks, I won't say his name, but in the entering exam, we had entering exam to enter the debate, and then you have to memorize the prayers for the debate. Otherwise, you're not allowed to go to debate. There's quite a few prayers, and my mind is like a sieve. So for me, it was quite difficult. But again, Jamyang, he was abbot at that time. He was very strict with me. He didn't let me enter debate until I memorized it. But you can go right with it if you sit in a group, you know, with people, and then when they recite all together, you just mumble. And then there's a lot of, like, you have a lineage prayer with this kind of Solwadep. Is I request blessing, right? So it's Solwadep. So in the end of the 4 lines, it's mostly Solwadep. So you can mumble and then come up and say Solwadep, right? So one of my friends did that, but there's also a few lines when it says Jingilap. So when he thought, oh, now I'm going well, he said Solwadep, but all the other monks said Jingilap. So then straight away could see this person didn't remember much. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. Anyway, it's interesting stories in the monastery. Yeah, it's not only serious business, but sometimes great fun. Yeah. Okay, so we go to the text, because also that will be talked. Our teachers always told us, you know, have fun, enjoy. You know, then it's easier. So that's why I crack these kind of stories. People can relax. Yeah. So we go to verse number 5 then. Yeah, so people don't have to do screen sharing. If people have, then they can read. Yeah, so it says the 4 great elements, you know, are not specific to the I. So how can entities be specific to the I? You know, clearly rejecting apprehension of matter itself. You can speak of matter in this manner. So that means this is referring to a kind of course, matter exists, right? So in the mind-only school, they talk about mind and matter being being empty of a different nature, and some interpretation as being the same nature. Yeah, so we talked about it already. What appears to your consciousness or your I consciousness, and what's appeared to my I consciousness, is different, right? Yeah, so that means that there's this interdependence of object and what is the object, what is being apprehended, and the apprehender. There's an interrelationship, right? You have an object, you have a mind, you have a physical sense power from the I, you know, so that's kind of this interconnectiveness between those aspects of the object, the consciousness, and the eyeball or the physical sense power. Because of that interrelationship, things appear to the mind, right? So if the object all exists by them from their own side, you know, the 4 great elements or the object of the senses, if they exist from their own side, they can never be apprehended. They can never appear to the mind, right? So that's what it talks about, a kind of, the relationship between what appears to the mind and the mind itself. Yeah, so we also say in the Heart Sutra, form is empty, emptiness is form, you know, so same thing. There's this correlation between an object with its particular qualifications, like being impermanent, like the table and the computer. You know, one qualification of the computer is that it's momentary changing, right? Another qualification of the computer is empty of inherent existence. And those 2 aspects, impermanence and empty of inherent existence, depends on the computer. Yeah? So this interdependence is also there in the qualifications of a particular object. Yeah. And in verse number 6 also it says, you know, since with the felt there is no feeling, you know, if there's no object or no mind that has been experiencing something, then there's no feeling, right? Yeah. So feeling itself is devoid of a self. And so in the sense of the feeling itself doesn't exist from its own side. That's what it talks about, you know. When it talks about self, it's kind of indicating something inherently existing. Self, yeah, it's not always referring to a person. Yeah, so when it says feeling itself is devoid of a self, means feeling itself doesn't exist inherently, right? As a self of a person also doesn't exist inherently. Yeah, as we just meditate upon. So you uphold That which is felt too is devoid of intrinsic existence or inherent existence. And so these verses just summarizes, So same if you read the Heart Sutra, the real way to recite the Heart Sutra is to, if you say no eye, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind. So if you recite that, actually you should think the eye doesn't exist from its own side, the ear doesn't exist from its own side, the nose doesn't exist from its own side, tongue, body, mind, So if you contemplate those points, know this, know that, actually you should meditate that things don't exist from their own side. Then you habituate your mind in a way it becomes a kind of meditation. Then when you wake up in the morning, things appear to your consciousness. Then you think, oh, it appears very solid, concrete out there, but actually it's not the way it appears, right? Yeah, so that's, our same in the mirror. We look in the mirror and we think, oh, that's me. I look in the screen and think that's me. Though here it's not that clear as in the mirror. In the mirror I get a more clear picture than here. But sometimes you think, oh, that's me. Or you have those mirrors. You have many of those in the fun parks. I don't know if you ever went. Those kind of, you have to pay some money and you can go inside. And then you have all those mirrors, and then you don't know where the outside is anymore because you see yourself everywhere. You know that? Yeah, so very interesting. And then somebody else who looks at you doesn't know where you are because they see all these images and they don't know what's reality, what's the real person and not, because they all look alike. Same. Yeah. 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 Very funny. Yeah, interesting. So that means that whatever appears is not reality in that regard. Yeah. Yeah. There's many tricks. People like to, scare others or freak others out by, this kind of illusionists on the TV. They disappear a plane and everything. Same thing. We talked about last time, I think. We talked about last time, right? Yeah. That like, oh, this lady has been cut into two. But then when you know the trick, you say, oh, but you straight away know it's a trick, right? And so it means a difference between appearance and not knowing reality, and an appearance and knowing reality. Yeah, the first time you look at the show, you think, oh, but the second time you saw the trick, then you don't say, oh, you say, yeah, that's the trick. You see? So then that's why we have to go towards two, that we see things are not, things don't exist the way it appears, especially with regard to the eye. Of course, conventionally things we sit here, we eat, we drink, but the objects, they appear in a particular way, and maybe the question is if they exist that way, exactly as they appear. That's the question. Because exactly as they appear, that makes things concrete. And that makes I, mine, and then afflictions come up. Destructive emotions take over. Yeah. So that's the training. Then verse number 7 is similar. It talks about name and the meaning of something. If the name and the meaning of something, or here translated word and referent, if they exist from their own side, fire is the name of something hot and burning, right? Yeah. But the word fire itself doesn't cause something hot and burning, right? Yeah. So things don't exist from their own side. They by depending on a particular basis which is suitable to be imputed fire, we say fire. Yeah. So also for the I or the self, based on the mere collection of the aggregate, there is a conventional self, right? There's a conventional I that thinks, I that writes things down. But the I doesn't exist concrete from its own side. That's the difference. There's a conventional I and an I we refute. There's two things, right? So the conventional mere collection of the aggregates, the mere collection of body and mind exists, right? You can feel your body, yeah? But on top of this mere collection of body and mind, there appears to be something mixed with body and mind that exists all by itself as an I or mine. Or that's the problem. That doesn't exist the way it appears. You see that? That distinction is very important to make. Yeah. And then also in verse 8, it talks about agent and action. Same thing. We doing an action and we being the agent of an action, those two don't exist from their own side. If they exist from their own side, it will not be capable of acting, you see? Like if you have a seed, if the seed exists all by its own, from itself, if the seed, you know, the seed of a corn plant or apple tree, you know, if the seed exists all by from its own side, how much fertilization you will put, it will never grow into a plant. Yeah, isn't it? Yeah, so as children, I don't know if you did the same thing. You put pots and then put seeds and then, you know, put plastic with the holes in there. You did? If you were a child, you did that or not? Just so, you know, with the kind of right, I had some other plans as well, but my mother did threw them out because it was before I became Buddhist though, but yeah, they grow very well behind the glass. But, so that means that by the right conditions, things grow, you know, that's, they grow. So that means that the seed doesn't exist from its own side, right? And it depends on causes and conditions. And by depending on causes and conditions, it grows. So the sprout also doesn't exist from its own side. Yeah, so the sprout depends on the seed, and you know, it's a kind of interactive relationship, of course, in fact, relationship. So nothing exists from its own side. You see that? Yeah. Yeah, it's just merely imputed by the mind. I find the river example always quite helpful. If you have a mountain of snow and that's you know, melting, and it comes a river, and the river goes into a lake. You know, if you go to the Alps or something, maybe in the Lake District, you have rivers or not? Yeah, yeah. So same thing. You can go Lake District, and it's good weather, not like today, but it's sunny, and then you go there and then you sit next to a river, but I don't know where the water comes from. From the hills. No mountains in the UK, from the hills, right? So that means that if you ever, when I was in the Alps, I found it quite helpful. If you sit, you know, you see the mountain and then the river comes. You cannot see the whole river, but in front of you, you see the river and there's a lake. So what we call a river is just temporarily a label based on the water molecules at a particular time, at a particular place. Right or not? So it's very interesting. We say a river, but actually, if you really look for it, if you pinpoint a water molecule that goes already in the lake, then it's not a river anymore, right? That particular water molecule or that group. Very interesting. Yeah, so our body and mind is very similar. It appears very concrete, but it's just merely imputed. Yeah. Anyway, that's what it talks about here. Verse 8 is a bit of a complex one, especially the first line. I had some difficulty with it, but I still have. Yeah. So yeah, it talks in a similar way about conventional level. You know, the agent also exists in a similar way. The action exists. And so same as a seeds and heat, moisture, fertilization, and sprout. Yeah, that's also a conventional relationship. Yeah. Yeah. And then verse number 9 it talks about that things don't exist inherently. Yeah, because if there's things that exist inherently, then how can you accumulate merit, for example? You know? So when we dedicate, you know, that's a practical thing. When you dedicate, you know, most of you are already quite, you know, into Buddhism a little bit. So we make a good motivation, then we talk about things, or we discuss, or we meditate, and then we dedicate, right? May by this virtue, may all sentient beings be free of suffering, and for that purpose may I become a Buddha, something like that. So then also you should dedicate with the understanding of interdependence. Yeah, so that means that there's 3 rounds, it says. You know, you making the prayer, and the aim towards 2, we make a prayer or dedication. All those 3 are empty of inherent existence. Yeah? And because of the interdependence of those 3, the prayer will come about, right? So if you think in that way, the dedication becomes much stronger. That's very important advice. Some masters of the past, though it's a debatable point, but they say if you dedicate in that way, anger cannot destroy. No? Normally we say anger can destroy positive potentials for results to come about. You know, some of you have studied that before. Yeah. So yeah, some scholars they say that, but in general speaking, it's because in the parts, on the parts we say contaminated and non-contaminated karma. So karma only becomes non-contaminated with direct perception of emptiness. So that proves the need for understanding, you know, these aspects of dedication as well. It becomes a kind of more substantial going towards the result. So if you think in that way, it's it's a practical thing. But everything we do in daily life, we should try to focus that nothing exists from its own side, but is in the nature of interdependence. But especially when you dedicate. Yeah. And then, verse 10 also talks about, without being known, it is not an object of knowledge. Yeah, so same thing. Without that, there is no consciousness as well. Yeah, so that means that consciousness only exists because it has this definition of clear knowing. Right? It has the potential to know and has a potential for things to appear to it. Yeah, so if consciousness all exists by itself, then these two qualifications of consciousness will not be present. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, maybe 11 and 10, 12, oh sorry, 11 and 12. So 11, if the characteristic is different from the characterized, and so there's also interdependence, right? So that means we label something or we give something a definition. So the definition and the definendum, as we technically say, they're also interdependent, right? Yeah. So that's the Buddha said, they not inherently exist by their own side, neither inherently different. So they exist by a dependence. Yeah. And in verse 12 it also says, devoid of characteristic and characterized, and free of utterance of words, with your eyes of perfect gnosis, of exalted wisdom, yeah, you bring tranquility to sentient beings. Because the Buddha saw this reality, yeah, of ultimate nature of existence, of interdependence and emptiness. So if you meditate well on emptiness, then when you get out of that meditation, you should automatically see things are in the nature of interdependence. Then you have the right view. If you come out of meditation and think, oh, doesn't matter, nothing exists, then you're wrong. Then you didn't meditate correctly. If you come out of your meditation on emptiness or your contemplation, you think, oh, things are just merely imputed by the mind, just causes and conditions. Then nothing exists from its own side. Then you're on the right track. So that's very important. That's the next, I think next Wednesday we're going to talk a little bit more about the reasons of dependent origination. Yeah, today and last Wednesday we talked about one and different. Yeah, that's one of the reasons. If you're more interested, then you should read in the Lamrims, especially the great Lamrims, the middle-length Lamrim of Lama Tsongkhapa, and the Lamrim Chemo that talks about the sevenfold reasoning of Chandrakirti. So all these reasons we're using comes from that sevenfold reasoning. Very profound. Yeah. So then I just read Tibetan, and then this for auspiciousness. I heard somewhere. Good. So verse 4 I did, no? Yeah. I just read in case. Yeah. Kandang yule jungwana deme pani yumembe sunye nidan sumbaru. Selva chi jimi de. That's verse 4, and then verse 5 when it talks about the elements regarding which, or the objects of the senses and the senses, right? Jungwa migi sumingbe denge migi jitarien sugne sumwa sumwa rabgagba suni kyugi detar sum zorba zoja meba demepe. So yeah, also feeling and the object of feeling, they also interdependent, right? Otherwise it cannot exist from it cannot exist from their own side. If so, then we could never feel something. Yeah? That's the Buddha, as you explained, the Buddha. Ming dan dun dan tate min. So also name and meaning, we label something, the word fire and fire itself, they're also not inherently different, right? Yeah. Mei kane tsikba gyur Shen Nam Senang Toba Megyu She Denpa Sungwa Kyuki Ten Jeba Rangwang Jebo Rangwang Ni Lekyan Tani Tani Duni Kyuki Ten Patsu Benzo Deba Chen Du Duba Kyuki Shebala Jeba. Then it talks about you know, the action and the kasa, the agent, you know, also those two are empty of inherent existence. Yeah. And Jebo Yume Joba Me Sunam Demin Tender Gi. So Tender Gi. So yeah, by depending on merits we accumulate yeah, as we just also said, to dedicate, you know, by reflecting on these points. Then Gekya Maki She Chigi Dagbo Gyugi Sun Sheba Meba Shejamin. Deme number Shebang me Deji She Dan She Ja Da Rang me Ji Kyugi Sun Se Ni Tsunja Shen Nina. So also what we define and give a definition to it too, yeah, the definition and the definiendum, yeah, also what we say, how we call something and the object itself, you know, they also interdependent, right? Tsani tsunja sheni na tsunja tsani meba yu tate miena mede par kyogi selbo nide ten tsani tsunja namja shen zigi zeba nangbangba kyogi yeshe chene gi rowa deta shiva dzu. So that says that by the power of your, you know, exalted wisdom, you were able to bring peace or pacify migrators, you know. So that's very moving. You see, it comes up again and again, and the praises of Nagarjuna and Lama Tsongkhapa to the Buddha, that by these teachings on emptiness, you help sentient beings to achieve the peace of nirvana eventually, and temporarily help them to achieve the peace of high rebirths, you know, by subduing the mind to understanding emptiness, and even on a day-to-day life. If you understand and reflect upon emptiness, then a lot of the aspects of concrete problems and concrete afflictions will become less. So that's great benefit. You know, that's why His Holiness also says, puts a lot of emphasis. Also says every teaching almost I teach about emptiness. So that's a sign that it's quite important. You know, even just contemplating it, although we don't understand it yet completely, it brings great benefits. No. Yeah, so we do that on a regular basis. Then the seeds are planted, and then one day we get it. Yeah, so then one day, then, you know, the job is done, so to say. Yeah. So maybe questions or not? It's already time, actually. Sorry, I'm running out of time. Over time.
We can have a few questions, maybe.
Yeah, sure.
A few questions. Okay, if people want to put their little blue hands up again, if they want to ask a question, and I will unmute you.
Physical, yeah, I saw. Yeah, Andreas, Peter. There's one physical hand there. You see?
If people put their little, if you go to the chat box and put your little blue hand up, because I can't see everybody at the same time. Who's got their hands up? Andreas. Oh, there you go.
Andreas, yeah.
There you go, Andreas.
Sorry, I don't know how this blue hand works.
It's actually a white hand, but yeah.
Okay. I think it's maybe it's a silly question, but I thought with the one and different reasoning,
yeah.
How does it work with the table and the leg of the table, for example?
Oh,
yeah.
With the table, yeah, the table, not the leg of the table, the leg of inherent existence of the table, right? Because the table appears very concrete out there. That's the object of refutation. That's the object, how it appears and doesn't exist. It appears concrete from its own side, right?
Yes.
So that appearance of existing from its own side is also not one or different from table. Because if it's one with table, it should appear as having many parts. As a table, the same logic applies. And the table has legs, has a flat surface, you know, edges, but it appears very concrete, you know. So it cannot be one. And then also can it be inherently different, because if you put a table aside, the appearance of the table will not arise. That concrete appearance. So to have a clear appearance of this concrete table appearing to the mind is a little bit more difficult than the appearance of the self of a person to the mind. Yeah, but the same logic applies. Yeah, but for the meditation, it's been advised first to meditate on what we just did, the self of a person. If that's understood well, then we go to the objects around us. It becomes easier. Yeah, something to work with or not?
Yeah, I think maybe you. Yeah, maybe my question was more silly. I didn't think about the leg, but the leg, just a part of the table. So, how do you?
So this table has many qualities, right?
Yeah.
It has form and shape, right?
Yeah.
So the form and shape appears to our eye consciousness, right? This table is also momentary changing. So the momentary changing nature of the table, we cannot see with our consciousness. We have to think. When it comes into existence, it starts disintegrating, right? So in a similar way, this table also is empty of inherent existence, meaning it appears very concrete out there, but actually if you analyze, it doesn't exist as concrete because it's momentary changing, you see? So that's for you a few reasons to think there's many aspects of the table and what are we actually talking about, what exists and what does not exist. Don't worry. Yeah?
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, there's a few hands.
Yeah, we've got Jenny next. Jenny and Dave.
Yeah.
Go ahead, guys.
Okay. Yes, when we were doing the meditation on emptiness, my experience was that when there was that whoo moment, it was something very physical in the body.
Yeah.
So although I didn't interpret that as an I think quite often that there will be we'll be very aware of the emotions arising, and often there's a correlation in the body, sort of physical something happening. Is that like the conventional truth aspect? Because that's one of the effects in terms of like is that seeing part of the cause and effect relationship there?
So basically what should happen with the oops feeling is if it's a oops feeling and then we monks, we have this, you know, you see? I can show in the camera, yeah.
I can try them with this.
Yeah. So then when the oops feeling happens, that means that you see that's not a concrete, but on a conventional level, there's a body, right? You meditate. Yeah, so that happens with real meditators, or during a teaching when Jason Sarasengye was sitting in a teaching by Lama Tsongkhapa, he had this feeling. The I doesn't exist the way it appears. So there's a kind of, because since beginner's lifetime, we grasp to it and believe it exists, right? And now actually you realize it doesn't exist the way it appears. So there can be a shock to the system. But at the same time, it should be seen that conventionally there's somebody meditating, right? So, but if you say conventionally there's somebody meditating, that's not the meditation on emptiness. There's a result of it. Yeah. So the meditation on emptiness means only the lack or the absence. So if you get a little bit of feel, maybe it's not the correct meditation yet, but if you get a little feel of nothing is concrete, then hold that absence for a little bit. Instead of just start thinking, oh, this is this, that is that. Yeah. And then again, let it appear how the I appears. Yeah, the object of refutation very clear, and then again reasoning. Yeah. Even though if you have realized emptiness at one point in the future, then it's still not enough, right? You have to realize again and again and again in order to eliminate all these levels of ignorance. Yeah. Yeah. Good.
Okay. Next is Alexander. There you go, Alexander.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can speak.
Before it wasn't working. So my question was about.
Oh, can you increase your volume, please?
Now?
A little bit louder.
I'm almost hitting my microphone.
Yeah. And I'm on top. I'm 100%.
I put my question in if somebody can.
Yeah, I can hear you now. Just tell me. Yeah.
Okay. Is it the case that with the time that we need to see the self more in a subtle form,
like for example, if I wanna look for self when I wake up, it's very hard to see. Like it's very hard to to understand what I'm trying to find.
Yeah. So what I say, if you wake up, and wash your face, then just see how things appear to the mind, right? Very concrete out there. Yeah. There's just a kind of build up a habituation that things don't exist that concrete as it appears. But when it comes to the self of the person, the actual meditation, then it's better to recall, to sit formally, or you have to put some effort, right? You have to have some concentration, and then recall a particular event that the eye appears very clearly. And then use these reasons of one and different. So that's in the formal meditation. So you do that in the formal meditation, then when you get out of that meditation, then you try to see what I said, when you get up and when you do things, see how things appear, and actually try to reason that things appear very concrete out there, but actually they're not. Though you cannot get that far as in your meditation, because to realize emptiness, you have to have concentration, right? So there's two things, right? In the in-between, in the actual contemplation, and in the in-between time, in between the contemplations. So most of our time is spent not on our meditation, right? Most of our time is spent doing things. So then, instead of doing things to reflect upon these things, we build up a kind of habituation. It can enhance our meditation. In another way, our meditation will enhance how things appear to our mind. So this, try to play with that. That's what I try to say.
And in meditation, it's always we need to bring like the gross, like really like gross image of self that we can like imagine.
Yeah, I mean, you have to have a very clear picture. When somebody criticizes you, when anger came up or attachment, and see just before the emotion or that affliction became strong, how did I appear? That's very essential. Yeah, so that's most of the time should be spent upon that recognition. Yeah, and then after that the reasoning. Yeah. Wait, volume lower. Yeah. Yeah. Next one.
Thank you, Alexander. Marco and Saida. There you go.
Thank you, Geshe.
Yeah.
Certain Eastern philosophies, like for example Hinduism, they believe in the existence of what they call in Sanskrit Purusha, the observer, the witness. So they say something separate from body and mind that perceives body and mind.
Yeah.
And perhaps that can have an analogy in Buddhism with the subtle consciousness, clear consciousness. And how does it work? Is gross consciousness depends on the sense consciousness and on the brain, and it's clear how that's interrelated with the body. But what about subtle consciousness? What does it depend upon? And is it different from this concept of the witness or the Purusha?
Yeah. You have a few hours?
Yes. Hopefully I have few lifetimes.
Yeah, so first of all, you have to be clear how you define self, right? Because we have Atma and Atma, right? We have those two terms. Yeah. So then when we say Atma, or non-self, means a self that doesn't exist from its own side. Right? I have a lot of debates I had before with a few friends of mine in India. So that's very clear. First of all, you have to have a clear picture in which school of philosophy you're talking about, and what is the definition of a self, right? And then you can say, oh, this exists or it doesn't exist, the way you describe it. And so that's the first step in this kind of debates. You know? So then we, in a few other schools where they say there's a self exists from its own side, or a creator, or one with the universe. There's many interpretations to that as well. You know? So one with the universe, or one with universal consciousness, or one with the guru's universal consciousness is kind of merging practice. It's not actually that the consciousness is merging, but it's kind of, we have seen in Mahamudra practice that your mind becomes one with the guru, right? Yeah, so it's not that actually they become the same, but they have the same qualities. Yeah, and then we can talk about these kind of subtler consciousness. So with subtler consciousness, we say we have a conventional self, right? We have a conventional body and mind, first of all. Yeah. In a similar way, we have a conventional consciousness. And we have a conventional subtle consciousness that goes from this life to the next life. Yeah. But even that stream of the most subtle consciousness, according to the Vajrayana, uses the most subtle energy to go from this life to the next life. That is also empty of immanent existence. Conventionally it exists, right? But it's not something that is beyond cause and effect, existing from its own side. So that's what we're refuting here. Yeah? A self or a consciousness that exists or seems to exist all by itself without dependence on karma, without dependence on cause and effect. That we cannot accept. Yeah? But there's a conventional stream of consciousness or a subtle stream of consciousness which goes from this life to the next life. So if you describe it in that way, then we say, we accept that. Yeah. So then we don't define that as Atma. Okay, that's the kind of Atma we accept. Yeah. Does it help a bit? Yeah. Yeah. So it's important to define, right? Give the definition to these terms. And then we know where we're talking about in a particular school of Buddhist philosophy. Even within Buddhist philosophy, there's 4 schools. And then also certain people in a particular school describe a self in a particular way, which is then be refuted by others and described in a different way. So it's very important to define what is the self and what does exist and what does not exist. Yeah?
I ask because if I try and meditate, it is as if myself says, well, you know, I'm nowhere to be found, but there is someone who's seeing all these.
Yeah, conventionally there's consciousness, and that consciousness has kind of perception, right? There's feeling, there's contemplation. So that consciousness exists. We don't say that consciousness doesn't exist. That consciousness exists, but that consciousness doesn't exist all by itself without dependence. Yeah, so the I that appears when we get angry or attachment arises, that appears all to exist by itself. And that doesn't exist. Yeah? So that we refute because that's the cause of all the problems. Yeah?
Thank you, Geshe.
Yeah, slowly. Step by step. Yeah? One more white hand.
Okay, thank you. One more. Laura. There you go, Laura.
Thank you. Thank you, Geshe. So my question is, I think I'm a bit between a sort of rock and a hard place, because when I'm not meditating on emptiness, I think I get it. The one and different works for me. I understand that.
Yeah.
But just now, and I have to admit, I don't really meditate very often. But just now when we meditated, my eye spoke to me. So it came up very clearly and I managed to observe it. And it did say to me, what you're doing is nonsense because I am your nature. That's what it said. I am your nature. And then when you talked about the seed, the eye spoke again and said, you see the seed, the nature of the seed, the eye of the seed is to become an orange tree, an apple tree, whatever.
Interesting. You have an interesting kind of entity there. Because the seed, there's one in the Samkhya school of Hindu philosophy, for example, they say a similar thing. But then the interpretation can be for different angles. For example, the result exists at the time of the cause. There's one interpretation. That means that the result for the apple seed to grow into an apple tree exists at the time of the cause. There's one interpretation. Yeah. So, but the result is not present at that time. But only the potential is present, right? Yeah. So, and that potential can only be activated by the power of other causes and conditions. Yeah. So, the Samkhya school of Hindu philosophy, also one of the Vaibhasika schools of Buddhist philosophy, have a similar interpretation when it comes to karma or when it comes to these seeds producing something. Yeah. So that means that, you can say that the potential exists, but the potential can only come into being by dependent causes and conditions, right? The result is not already there at the time of the seeds. right?
Mm.
You tell this self. You tell him or her.
I'll try.
Yeah.
I think it's a him. I don't know.
So yeah. So in waking, if you just walk around and think about, then this reasoning makes sense. It's logical, right?
Mm.
So then when you contemplate, then you should maybe more put an emphasis on the neutral perspective of being the observer.
Okay.
Right? Don't get involved in how things appear and take that aspect. Because what you try to do is how things appear to your mind, and you observe from a distance, like a scientist observing a phenomena without prejudice, just being completely neutral. Same when we do the meditation on practicing patience or love and kindness as an antidote to its anger. If you recall the faults of anger and you get angry at the time of the meditation, then your meditation will not be very successful.
Yeah.
Right? So that means you have to have this observer aspect, neutral from a distance. In a similar way, we should do that with how the eye appears, and observe. Yeah, and nothing more than that. Yeah.
Should I be meditating on emptiness like every day? Proper meditation, like sat down meditation?
Sat down, yeah, every day.
Okay.
But maybe in the beginning, just a few minutes. Like we did this meditation very short, or you can make it shorter, right? And then you analyze during the day, do things exist the way they appear or not? And especially when a person criticizes you or says something that you think, the eye comes up, how dare this person say this to me? Or when affliction comes up, then you sit and have with a neutral perspective you analyze. Don't get irritated whatsoever. Just take a deep breath and remember that and analyze. That's the main clue initially.
Okay,
and then
thank you.
Put a lot of effort in that regard, and then slowly, with reasons without losing this object, you reason to the point that it disappears. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah?
Thank you.
All right.
I have a question for next week as well, if you want it in advance. Yeah.
You put your hand up. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question already for next week.
Yeah, next week. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, because we over time. It's already, Sorry, I have to apologize. Thank you. Thank you very much. But so sorry that we almost how long? Yeah, 50 minutes. So sorry to keep you waiting, and maybe more important things in life. I don't know. Yeah, emptiness is pretty important, but can. So try to dedicate. So quick dedication. So we said, according to the quote from Sarah, that we need both, right? Method and wisdom, or kasa. Bodhicitta and emptiness. So also pray that oneself, all sentient beings without exception, generate these two minds and may they improve and never degenerate but increase more and more. So where's bodhicitta? Janjo semjo grimboje magye pana gege geba nyamba meba yang gone gunde beva sho toni tawa rimboje magye pana gege geba nyamba meba yang gone gunde beva sho. So there's bodhicitta and emptiness, and then also pray for long and healthy life of all the precious teachers, and in particular His Holiness Dalai Lama, and all His Holy Wish be spontaneous fruits. Karera we korbe zingan so benda dewa malu jongwe chenre zegwan tenzeng yazo yi shabe jite padu. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, study well, prepare the remaining verses for next Wednesday, and then have fun. Enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you, Geshe.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Yeah. Good night. Sweet
Good
dreams.
night, everyone.
Meditate.
Take care. Have a good weekend.
Yeah. Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.